Hey, this is Dr. Ben Weitz, host of the Rational Wellness Podcast. I talk to the leading health and nutrition experts and researchers in the field to bring you the latest in cutting-edge health information. Subscribe to the Rational Wellness Podcast for weekly updates. And to learn more, check out my website, drweitz.com. Thanks for joining me, and let's jump into the podcast. Hello, Rational Wellness Podcasters. Today, we will be speaking about stress, the science of the part of our nervous system that regulates stress, and about a new wearable device, the Apollo, that uses gentle vibrations to help us to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, known as our rest and digest nervous system, so we can have a better balance with our sympathetic flight or fight nervous system. In today's fast-paced world, made even more stressed by worrying about getting COVID-19 and dying, many people are in sympathetic mode much too much of the time. This can lead to a number of symptoms and health problems. In fact, it's a very long list, but it can include anxiety, depression, insomnia, hypertension, adrenal dysfunction, other hormonal imbalances, and a weakened immune system. And given that we're still dealing with COVID-19, having a weakened immune system is not exactly a good thing right now. The Apollo wearable device, which is the wearable device that we're speaking about, also improves heart rate variability, which also translates to better athletic performance. Today, we'll be speaking with the inventor of the Apollo, Dr. David Rabin, MD, PhD, a board-certified psychiatrist, a neuroscientist. He's the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Apollo Neuroscience, which is the first scientifically validated wearable system to improve heart rate variability, focus, relaxation, and access to meditative states by delivering gentle, layered vibrations to the skin. In addition to his clinical psychiatry practice, Dr. Rabin is the co-founder and executive director of the Board of Medicine and a psychedelic clinical researcher currently evaluating the mechanism of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy in treatment-resistant mental illness. Dr. Rabin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So tell us how you developed the Apollo wearable device and about some of the research that went into it.
Sure, happy to. So Apollo was a technology that originally wasn't called Apollo. It was just an idea starting in 2014 at the University of Pittsburgh.
Was there an original name?
There were a couple names, actually. So the first name was Emoto, which was named after the famous Japanese scientist who discovered that water can store vibrations and frequency patterns. So the idea that applying a vibration pattern to water creates what's called structured water, which actually changes the way that the water molecules interact with each other. And that can be visualized in what people call somatics, which is like patterns of vibration in water or some kind of liquid. And also if you put sound, and you could just Google cymatics with a C and CYMATICS, and you'll see a lot of this stuff. So, but that was there's a lot of inspiration that goes back thousands of years to the ancient practices of breathing and meditation that change the way that we interact with different parts of our bodies and how we become aware of our bodies. That led to a lot of this work. And I think, you kind of summed it up in the introduction with the balance of the stress response sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic rest and digest and recovery response nervous system, which we can get into in more detail. But the main gist of it is that people who have chronic stress-related illnesses, and I'm just going to talk about mental illnesses for the time being, but this does apply to physical illnesses like chronic pain as well, and nerve pain and things of that nature. And people who have these illnesses tend to have higher, and the illnesses that you mentioned earlier, depression, PTSD, anxiety, insomnia, these kinds of illnesses get worse with stress almost all the time. Invariably, the symptoms get worse with stress. So we can measure this by looking at heart rate variability, as you mentioned earlier, which is a measure. It's one of our most accurate measures of the way that our heartbeat changes in response to stress in the environment or safety from the environment. Safety makes our heart rate variability go up. Safety makes us feel recovered and helps us feel like it's safe enough for us to allow our recovery nervous system to turn on, which means recovery means turning on the immune system, turning on metabolism, turning on our digestive system, our ability to absorb nutrients effectively, our reproductive system, and our creativity system, and all the other, our sleep and system, all this good stuff that makes our lives really lovely. But we can't be under threat, or we can't perceive that we are under threat or believe that we're under threat for that system to turn on. So many of us who have experienced any kind of trauma or negative experiences, and this is the population that I worked with at the University of Pittsburgh that kind of spurred this idea, a lot of veterans and people who have treatment-resistant PTSD, and we saw that they all have low heart rate variability. And this was actually seen in the literature for many other scientists and doctors who were looking at these folks, and that they're meaning low heart rate variability, meaning their stress response system is always up here, always on, and very active, and their parasympathetic recovery nervous system is always underactive. They're always perceiving themselves to be unsafe or in a survival threat situation.
And really, that's just to interrupt for a second.
Yeah, sure.
That's where the whole concept of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, it's often explained by thinking about the zebra on the savannah, and it sees a lion. And so we're designed for our sympathetic nervous system to put us in this state of stress and have all the blood go to the muscles, which means there's no time to deal with digestion or all the other things that the parasympathetic nervous system is associated with. Because right now we have to, the zebra has to run for its life to avoid being eaten by the lion. And then under normal circumstances, maybe that occurs once or twice during the day, and the rest of the time the zebra's calm. And
exactly.
Our body's designed to go into this sympathetic nervous system, but only for short periods of time.
Right.
And in modern life,
only to get us out of danger in the moment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in modern life, we're constantly feel like we're in this state of stress, real or perceived, that we're constantly, have to be in this revved up state.
Right. And part of the reason for that is evolutionary, right? We purposely evolved the system, which is not unique to us. All mammals, almost all animals on the known earth that have brains have this system in place. Even going back to very ancient sea snails that only have like 12,000 neurons. Just to give you an idea, we have like 100 billion neurons. So all of these animals have this system where as soon as there's a perceived threat, survival threat, lack of something coming to eat us or kill us, lack of shelter, food, water, or air, our survival system kicks in, as you said, to divert all available resources to our muscles, to our heart, to our lungs, and to the motor cortex of our brain to fight, flight, or freeze, get out of that situation to safety, right? If we are accidentally diverting resources to our reproductive system at a time or digestion, when we're supposed to be running from a bear or a lion, we will not likely make it out of that situation. So that system is tightly evolved to save us. But we don't have bears and lions around us most of the time anymore. And so that system, unfortunately, starts to get turned on by other things, like too many emails or too many cell phone buzzes and pings, or our kids screaming, or work responsibilities, or you name it, pandemic thoughts and the election and whatever else is going on in the world, right? Every little thing starts to trigger the system because we don't have the context to say, oh, wait, this isn't a survival threat. This is just something that's annoying me, right? And so that is critically important to understand, because what is important, because that helps us to know that we are in control of the outcome. So if we recognize that our emails are not actually a survival threat, even just for a moment, or our kids or our work responsibilities, whatever it is not actually a survival threat that's triggering us, and we can recognize that by taking a deep breath, taking a walk, pressing on our chest, doing some like basic self-touch exercises, doing a brief meditation. And this is not necessarily easy. It can be tricky to do in the moment, but all of these activities naturally bring us in very quickly back into balance because they send a signal to our brains, our amygdala, which is that fear center in our brains that governs the balance of this stress response and recovery response system, that says, hey, bud, if you're safe enough, if you're safe enough to take the time to feel like you can pay attention to your breathing right now, or pay attention to the feeling of a gentle touch on your body or the feeling of Apollo vibrating on your body, you can't possibly be running from a lion right now, right? Right. And that's mostly subconscious. It's beneath our awareness, and that creates an instant loop. That's a positive loop that says, I am safe enough to be able to think about myself right now. I'm safe enough to feel my breath right now. I can't be in a survival situation. And that gradually brings the amygdala activity down, and that helps us to cope with stress more effectively. And so Apollo, we designed at the university to tap into this network and activate the safety response system to help people who are struggling with treatment-resistant mental illnesses recover and be able to have more of their cognitive resources available at any time when they would normally feel unsafe, by helping them remember that, hey, you're actually safe. If you can feel Apollo right now, you're safe enough to be able to take your time to make a good decision rather than a decision that's impulsive and based on a past pattern that isn't serving you.
So of the various types of stimuli, why did you choose touch?
So we chose touch because, number one, touch is the most evolutionarily tight pathway that connects to safety. So if you look back at ancient animals like we were talking about, we don't even have to go back into sea snails, but we can go into like old mammals, right? Like monkeys and earlier than monkeys. All of these mammals, which are, millions of years older evolutionarily than we are, they all use touch to convey safety to each other. A mother holds their young, right? And that comforting of touch in and of itself allows the body to re-regulate itself through the secretion of natural hormones that many of us unfortunately self-medicate to get those hormones released, but they actually can be secreted by our brains naturally. And those hormones are the best ones that come from touch. They're dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, natural endogenous opioids from our own brain that makes opioids that are natural, that reduce pain, and even endocannabinoids that reduce inflammation and help balance our nervous system through the endocannabinoid and receptors in our body. So and there's others too, but those pathways get activated by touch. They get activated by touch, not just in us and all of these other animals. And then those pathways help to reduce inflammation in the body very, very quickly, and help to remind us very quickly that we're safe. And so, and the best part about touch is you can be touched while you're doing other things, right? So if you're performing surgery, giving a talk, seeing a patient, running a meeting, whatever it is, right, driving, you can be touched gently, and it's not distracting, and it can improve your performance and your presentness and focus. Music is harder to do that with. Music's great, but it's harder to take with you everywhere you go. Right. So based on convenience and the evolutionary psychology and the biology, that is how we ended up settling on touch.
Interesting. And how do certain vibrations and the Apollo wearable device work to create this balance? Explain why certain vibrations have a different effect.
Sure. So I think this is one of the most interesting things about neuroscience in the body, because we're actually experiencing this phenomenon that you described in every day of our lives. When we turn on a song in our house, right, or in our headphones or wherever we are, that song has a certain tempo, a certain rhythm, a certain energy level to it. And we don't listen to the same kind of music when we're working out or dancing or hanging out with our friends that we listen to when we're meditating or relaxing or going to bed, right? We would almost never switch those musical types. Because they are very different energy levels and different mood states. And so that pathway of frequency rhythm that impacting our energy level and our mood is well described and characterized in music for thousands of years. It's not new by any stretch. And actually our whole founding research team all had musical backgrounds. We all either played instruments growing up or still played instruments, or were just heavily influenced and lovers of music. And we were always fascinated by the way that music affected our bodies. So when I started doing this work in 2014, a lot of my strategy was, what can I take from our understanding of the neuroscience of music, the understanding of the neuroscience of touch, and use what we know to compose songs for the skin instead of the ears, right?
Right.
And that's really what Apollo is. Apollo is music that is composed for our touch receptors on our skin instead of our ears, that you can wear with you and take with you at any time. So the frequency patterns are in large part derived from what music makes us feel good, what music rhythms make us feel good, and also what breathing rhythms make us feel good. And we kind of mash the two together based on the scientific literature that had been done before us, and we ended up coming to these really incredibly powerful patterns that are not just powerful, they're predictable for 90 to 95% of people, where we can send this to you. And as long as your goal is aligned with the energy of the frequency vibration, you're very likely to get the outcome that you desire, which is really interesting. Which is very similar to what happens with music.
Interesting. That I think you just answered my next question, which is going to be, do all people respond the same way to the same types of vibrations? Is there a range of response?
Yeah, there is a range. Not everyone is the same. And the reason for that is because we have different associations with the stimuli, right? We have different associations with vibration, just like not everybody likes the same kind of music. Not everybody's going to like the same kind of vibration. So we did a lot of testing before we put this out onto the market. Apollo was released in January of 2020. We had been working on it in the lab for about 5 to 6 years before that. And then we had done three clinical trials and about 2,000 case studies in the real world with prototypes before we released the commercial device to figure out how to get the best results. We tried to remove as much of the subjective experience as possible in terms of from music, where somebody could say, oh, I like this song, I don't like this song. We didn't want that, right? It shouldn't be personal. It should just be the bare minimum that activates the nervous system in a soothing way. And so after a lot of refinement and an enormous amount of experimentation in the lab and the real world, we figured out that there are specific rhythms that work in, as I said earlier, roughly 90 to 95% of people based on a goal-directed behavior. So you say, I want to wake up. I want to wake up, you set it the wake up frequency, 90 to 95% of people will wake up. Same for clear and focus, same for socializing and creativity, same for recovering after exercise. But if you say, I want to wake up, and you put on a sleepy mode, it probably won't wake you up, right? It's going to do the opposite. So you want to the whole goal is to align your outcome with what your action is, and for anything we do. So that helps to the way that we've designed the app sort of helps with that alignment. And it's going to get better over time. And that helps increase the outcomes because people are goal-directed in their behavior. There are about 5 to 10% of people who are, interestingly, we call paradoxical responders. And there's a lot of reasons why people respond differently. But again, this is a wellness product that is not, no product works 100% of the time for everyone. Right. So what we always tell people is, if you're one of those people who this doesn't work the way you expected, play around with the different modes, because sometimes the modes that energize you might actually be the modes that calm other people down, and the modes that calm you down might be the modes that energize other people.
Yeah, I have patients, the same thing. They'll say that any drug or nutritional product that is designed to stimulate me makes me tired, and the opposite.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And a lot of that has to do with, I think, two things, one of which is just our body's makeup, that we're mostly the same, but we're a little bit different between each of us. And I think the other part of it is just our past experience and the association we have with that feeling. So for example, if you have a negative association with touch, and that you've never been touched in a loving way, or it was always associated with pain or discomfort, then it may take a little longer for you to get comfortable using the Apollo if you associate it with touch in that way. Again, that's a cognitive association that's associated with trauma. So that's just one example, but there are lots of other situations that are fairly uncommon, but people do have these kinds of experiences where there's a little bit of variability. In the future, looking into 2021, 2022, we're really excited to increase customization of the Apollo. So the software will grow and learn about each user to deliver a more personalized experience for each person, starting with timing and then gradually customizing the patterns as well.
Oh, interesting. I've really been enjoying this discussion, but now I'd like to pause to tell you about the sponsor for this episode of the Rational Wellness Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Pure Encapsulations, which is one of the few lines of professional nutritional supplements that I use in my office. Pure Encapsulations manufactures a complete line of hypoallergenic, research-based dietary supplements. Pure products are meticulously formulated using pure, scientifically tested and validated ingredients. They are free from magnesium stearate, gluten, GMOs, hydrogenated fats, artificial colors, sweeteners, and preservatives. Among other things, one of the great things about Pure Encapsulations is not just the quality products, but the fact that they often provide a range of different dosages and sizes, which makes it easy to find the right product for the right patient, especially since we do a lot of testing and we figure out exactly what the patients need. So, for example, with DHEA, they offer 5, 10, and 25 milligram dosages in both 60 and 180 capsules per bottle size, which is extremely convenient. And now, back to our discussion. How can Apollo improve anxiety and stress and depression? And can it be an alternative for people who maybe don't do well on antidepressants or want to get off them and they're phenomenally difficult to get off of?
Right. Yeah, so that's a great question. That was actually the focus of when we first developed Apollo. The whole goal was, how do we help these people who have treatment-resistant depression, treatment-resistant PTSD, anxiety disorders, substance use disorders, people who have tried everything under the sun nearly and never had good results in outcomes. How do we help those people feel better? And the reason why we focus on that group, because in PTSD populations, that's like 50% of the population, maybe more. In populations of depression, that's 30% or more of people. And these are two of the most common mental illnesses worldwide. So it's a real problem.
Anxiety is really growing, especially among younger people.
Right. And so it's a real problem if 30 to 50% of people are not getting better with what is considered to be the gold standard of treatment, or several gold standards of treatment. So when we originally developed the technology, this population was a huge focus for us, and veterans were a big part of that and still are. And so we have found that these people, in our preliminary findings from people just telling us about their experiences in the real world, but also from our early clinical trials, actually respond really, really well to the Apollo. It's hard to say exactly why, but we do know that certain stress response, stress recovery techniques actually work better when people are more stressed out. When the body is more activated on the stress response side, there's a bigger shift, and for longer, there's a bigger shift noticeable when people experience an intervention that makes them feel safe, because all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, I haven't felt this feeling in a really long time. And so that in and of itself is therapeutic, because it helps them recognize that, hey, I didn't really have to do that much to achieve this, but it didn't require a medicine. It didn't require a pill. And I can just press these buttons and activate the state as often as I need to. And kind of like deep breathing it over time actually trains the body, or trains us to remember and learn how to enter these states more effectively without the device. So oftentimes people who use it start using it a lot from the beginning. They use it every day for a month or 3 months. And then after several months of using it, they actually start to decrease their usage naturally because they're getting more benefit with less frequent use, and they start to use it more intentionally for specific goals. But yes, so the goal was to to develop the technology down the medical path, which we are going in addition to the consumer path to help these people with these illnesses. And from the reports so far, which are not published yet, they're still in progress, but from the reports so far, we are seeing really incredible results for these illnesses, and it's incredible. And again, I will say, as a caveat, this is not yet a FDA approved or cleared treatment tool. It is a consumer wellness product, and we are working down that path. But right now, it's a consumer wellness product, and we're not making any treatment claims about it. But it does help a lot.
Yeah. It'd be great if you included in that, if you could do a study with people who are on SSRIs and similar
I forgot to mention that.
Who are trying to get off those medications and use this as part of the program of weaning them off those medications, as well as maybe other lifestyle factors.
That's a great point. I forgot to mention that. So that is one of the most interesting things that we found is we do see that people who use Apollo are voluntarily able to taper off of some of these medicines. Everything from SSRIs, we haven't done a study yet with those,
but really, really hard to get off of.
They are really hard to get off of. But the medicines that we've been seeing people come off of are, I would say, harder to get off of. They're opioid narcotics, benzodiazepines, and methamphetamine. Wow. So we've seen, I would say they're in the same category of tough to taper. And we've seen people who have chronic illnesses who are using Apollo, people in the real world, they're just writing us. And people from our trials are writing us and telling us that they are using Apollo and they're finding that they don't need their Xanax anymore. They don't need their benzodiazepines for sleep. They're able to use less or none of their pain medicine. We just had a person write in today that they decreased on our reviews, they decreased their pain medicine dosing from every day to once a week within a month of use. Wow. I mean,
that's amazing.
So this is why this is so exciting, because it starts to show us how much of our suffering might actually be caused by our stress and how we address stress and how we approach it, which is completely 150% within our control most of the time.
Absolutely. I treat a lot of patients with the functional medicine approach for gut health challenges like IBS and reflux, and I could see where this device could be really helpful. Have you tested it for digestive disorders?
We have not tested it for that yet. We have a lot of interest from folks in the microbiome community, so we will be looking at that. But we don't have any of those studies ongoing currently.
Yeah, cool. So you mentioned heart rate variability. Maybe you can explain more about exactly what this is and how heart rate variability can be improved with the Apollo, and then also how heart rate variability is associated both with various types of diseases. I was looking at some of the data. It's associated with increased risk of coronary heart disease, risk of death from heart disease, and it's also associated with increased, improved athletic performance.
Right.
In fact, it seems to me HRV should really be a good anti-aging marker as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really where this is going, because we haven't for many years, forever, we haven't had good biomarkers in science for tracking the effects of aging or stress, right, and how quickly we are aging. And HRV, heart rate variability, is a really interesting biomarker because what it is it's a measurement of the rate of change, how quickly our heart rate goes up or down with the environment. And so if we have as you were saying, if we have a low heart rate variability, meaning our heart rate takes longer to go up in response to stress and longer to come down when the stress is gone and we're in a safe environment, then we are more likely to perform inconsistently. We are more likely to be injured in intense performance, demanding performance, especially in the elite athletics literature, more likely to become sick and more likely to suffer from metabolic disorder, heart disease, and to die if we get sick, right? So what this is saying, and the complete contrary is true if we have high heart rate variability, which means that when stress comes, our heart rate jumps up really quick to adapt to the situation. And then when stress is gone, our heart rate comes down very quickly to adapt to the situation of safety and enter recovery mode. And so what this is really saying is that if we're in a chronically stressed state more of the time, then we can measure this as low heart rate variability. And that is a biomarker that shows that if we stay in that situation, without doing anything about it, we are more likely to develop mental and physical health problems. And our immune system isn't going to work as well. And we're going to probably not sleep as well on a regular basis and not feel as good on a regular basis. And if we, on the other hand, train ourselves using the techniques like deep breathing, getting at least 30 minutes of exercise, most days of the week, eating healthy, doing meditation practices, yoga, mindfulness, or, soothing touch, listening to soothing music and getting good sleep, and all of these kinds of things, or a combination of some of these things, then we can reverse that process and train our nervous system to be more in balance more of the time, and which is reflected as high heart rate variability and more likelihood of recovering from illness, better likelihood of performing consistently at a high level, and a better likelihood of just feeling good more of the time.
What's the preferred way to measure heart rate variability?
That's a tough question, because the preferred way as a scientist or doctor is an EKG machine, right? And you have to do, traditionally, to measure heart rate variability accurately, you actually have to do an EKG of a person at rest for 3 minutes. And that is not easy to do outside of a laboratory.
Right.
Or outside of a clinical setting.
Right.
So now there's wearables that can measure heart rate variability, because a lot of companies have realized, hey, this is really cool, and we're already tracking heart rate. So why don't we just try to measure HRV from the heart rate data that's coming in? And because it's just taking just taking the heart rate data and doing a fancy mathematical calculation.
Are there devices that do a better job of this?
Yeah. So the Apple Watch is fairly decent. And Oura Ring, this guy is fairly decent.
Right.
I would say those are two of the best.
Okay.
However, the caveat is that the quality of the measurement has a lot to do with when you're taking the measurement, right? So if you're taking the measurement when you're moving in any respect, or you're in like an environment that has lots of noise, or physical, electrical noise, sound noise, lots of like ambient vibration, like you're in a car or a plane or something like that, you will get consistently inaccurate, unreliable results from these measurements. Even with an EKG, you would get unreliable results in a noisy environment. So it's really critical for people to understand that the wearables they use at home to track their biometrics, like HRV, are notoriously unreliable, and they have to be looked at in an over time kind of fashion, not in a short-term fashion. The short-term data is sometimes useful, but most of the time it's not, and it's hard to tell when it is and when it's not. So the trends over time are way more interesting, and what we want to aim for is trending our resting heart rate coming down, our HRV, heart rate variability, going up, and our deep sleep and REM sleep going up, and our total sleep efficiency going up, these are all the common measures these devices use.
So right now, there's no really good device for just regular, everyday clinical usage if you're not going to be doing an EKG for 3 minutes.
There's no great devices for HRV specifically for the average person to use at home right now. Okay. For heart rate, there is good stuff. The ones I mentioned, Whoop is also good, and resting heart rate is a pretty good measure that can be very useful. We're getting there on the HRV front. Devices are getting better. The technology is rapidly getting better, getting smaller, getting more precise. But I think we're just at a point where we're not quite there yet. And even if you are using these other wearables, you really have to be in like a quiet setting to get accurate measures that you trend over time. But we will get there eventually.
Right. What about arrhythmia? I not long ago interviewed Dr. Asim Desai, who has a book about arrhythmia, and he talked a lot about trying to emphasize the parasympathetic state and how nervous system stress plays a big role in arrhythmia, and that's a really common problem for people these days.
It is.
I could see where this would be beneficial.
Yeah, we don't have any studies on arrhythmia yet, but we do have a number of people, and I work with a cardiologist in Pittsburgh, an interventional cardiologist, who's a really wonderful help to us.
Joseph Maroon?
No, Dr. Brian Donahue, actually.
Oh, okay.
Joseph Maroon is a neurosurgeon who we also work with.
Oh, okay.
But we all work together, and it's been really interesting to see how many people have used Apollo for atrial fibrillation or for, arrhythmias, as you said, on their own. We don't instruct anybody to do it, but people will use it. And they have told us that they feel like they have less frequent arrhythmias, because they're calmer on a regular basis. And I think that it just shows, again, how much stress actually impacts us without us knowing it. When we haven't been taught to recognize what's going on, because it's just part of the normal day-to-day of being stressed all the time, we sometimes forget that stress really does play a major role in our health. Absolutely.
So, yeah, you mentioned that there's different modes that the Apollo device has. So I noticed there's one mode to help improve concentration and work performance. Maybe you can explain how that works differently. And it's fascinating that the same device that can improve sleep can also improve alertness and performance.
Yeah. So again, going back to the music analogy, right? Our speakers can do this too, as long as you choose the right song and the right volume. We can do the same thing with music. And I think that with Apollo, what we did was we were in the lab at the University of Pittsburgh, and we wanted originally, because people with PTSD and people who are chronically stressed out have notoriously struggle with intense cognitive performance tasks, and that require like a lot of attention, and especially boring tasks. And so we ended up giving 38 healthy subjects one of these very boring and taxing tasks that NASA gives to astronauts before they go into space to test their ability to do very tedious work under frustrating conditions. And so what was really fascinating was when we put people through this task, our goal was, and this was the first study that we did, which was a double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled crossover study in healthy folks at the University of Pittsburgh. And we found that there was a specific increase in heart rate variability in these folks with Apollo frequencies only, and not with placebo and not with no vibration conditions. And every subject had every condition and had no idea what condition they were getting. Nobody knew what was what or what this was supposed to do. And the clear and focused mode was the mode that put people into the best of what we would call a peak performance or flow state, where people felt like zoned in. So they had people on this mode had, some of them had up to 25% increase in performance in 3 minutes. Wow. So if you could imagine what that is, that's like the amount of difference on this kind of task that people see with amphetamines. With just a vibration on your
stimulate the sympathetic nervous system in some way, like amphetamines do.
So it's both. So okay. I think what's really interesting about flow or peak performance is that it's not the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. They coexist all the time. They are never just one or just the other.
Right.
They coexist all the time, just at least a little bit, and because we need both systems to function. And so what's interesting is if you can boost parasympathetic and sympathetic together, which is what many scientists have classified as the state necessary to access flow or peak performance, then you can bring the body into a state where there's increased energy, sympathetic, right? Increased awareness, sympathetic, but also increased attention control and increased emotion regulation. And the combination of those things directly increases performance.
Fascinating.
Right? So that was what we aimed for in that trial, and we hit it right on the money, which was really exciting. And then we started looking at what other states can we induce, right? And that was also initially a part of that study as well, where we gave people like 20 different frequency patterns that we came up with in the lab. And we just said, feel this for 30 seconds and tell us, rate on the scale how it makes you feel. Is it possible for people to tell in 30 seconds that a brief vibration changes the way they feel? And we actually saw there was pretty reliable reporting. People generally said close to the same answers for the same vibration patterns. So that started to give us the beginnings of an algorithm that was not just one pattern or two patterns that can induce one or two states, but really a mathematical understanding of how you can change the frequencies reliably a little bit in different directions to reliably induce certain states, because our states of energy are actually on a spectrum from sleep to running from a bear, right? So all the performance and recovery states actually when we're awake, lie in between running from a bear and sleeping. So everything exists between those two, and those are the two that form the top end and the bottom end of the Apollo modes.
So what are the modes that the Apollo has?
So the most energizing mode, which is I would not say this is calming at all personally, but it's very energizing. It's like having a shot of espresso for most people, and but it lasts a shorter time, and that's the energy and wake up. Then there's the social and open, which is like a social creative flow state that's calm. Most people use it when they're working in groups or socializing when they're tired. Clear and focused is the next one down, and these go in order from most energizing to least energizing. So energy and wake up, social and open. Clear and focused is that deep focused flow that's kind of like amphetamines, and then the one lower than clear and focused is rebuild and recover, which is basically the most balanced, even sympathetic and parasympathetic, which is with the goal of just rapidly calming the body down after a physical or mental or emotional stress of any kind. I really use that after travel or after exercise in particular. And we've shown that brings heart rate down much faster after exercise, which is really interesting. And then we go into the much more calming parasympathetic frequencies. So that's meditation and mindfulness, which is great for meditating. It's also great for what we call calm flow. So this is just like being like a Buddha master, just like going throughout your day, just feeling in the zone and calm, but not worried, not anxious, not like you have to do anything.
And you can use this while you meditate to reach a deeper meditative state, right?
Yes, and we showed that in a study at the University of Pittsburgh as well. That's in the works. It's really fascinating because people say you have to spend, enormous numbers of hours meditating before you can finally reach this state. People say you have to spend, 12 hours a day for weeks on end to reach a deeper state, if that's something that could be achieved. Yep. Yeah, sometimes hundreds of thousands of hours of breath work and meditation to learn how to enter deeper states, which is really interesting. And so we've shown that Apollo, within 12 minutes, can start to make a non-meditator's brainwave patterns look like an experienced meditator's brainwave patterns.
Wow, fascinating.
So that's something that is really exciting, because transitioning into a meditative state is also like a safety situation, right? When we're meditating or sleeping, and for us to really recover deeply, which is doing things like meditation, yoga, sleep, that kind of stuff, we have to feel safe, right? When you're meditating and your eyes are closed and where you're sleeping, that's like the time that we are more physically vulnerable than any other time. So if there's any part of our reptilian, old brain, the amygdala, that thinks that we are not safe in those situations, we won't be able to meditate, and we will not be able to sleep, and we will not be able to access these higher states of consciousness that facilitate very powerful healing for ourselves, and which is what I teach people in my clinical practice. So Apollo helps people state change, and whether that's going from stress to calm to work, calm to focus to meditation to socializing. Whatever the state change is, automatically all state change for human beings or any animal creates a stressor. So what Apollo does is it just smooths out the transitions by calming the body. It reminds us that this change of state is not threatening to us.
Wow.
In and of itself. And then that smooths out the transition from one state to another.
This is really fascinating. I just can't believe how fascinating the applications of this device can be.
We couldn't either at first. When it was really exciting when these results came back, because I've been doing research for a long time. My colleagues that I worked with on this have been doing research for a long time. And I can tell you that it's like once in a lifetime that you actually come up with something that's this works this well.
Now, where do you wear the device? You wear it on your wrist, or you wear it?
I actually wear it on my ankle.
Okay.
The device comes with an ankle strap and a wrist strap. Most people, I think, prefer to wear it on the ankle. And the main reason for that is because the primary use case of Apollo that most people use it for is relaxation and sleep. And the second one is focus. So for sleeping, most people prefer to have the wearable on the ankle where it will never be near anyone's head when they're sleeping.
Right. And are there EMFs produced by this?
Only what is produced by any Bluetooth device. It's been tested and for all of that radio frequency signaling. So it's under all the legal limits and all that. That being said, there are people who are still sensitive to EMF below the legal limits, and we have included an airplane mode from the beginning to turn off all signaling for people. So the device actually works and can be completely untethered from the phone. And you could turn off the radios entirely. So there's zero EMF in airplane mode. And we have,
interesting.
Yeah. And then the device doesn't use EMF as a therapy, it uses sound waves. So, right. So the sound waves are very safe. They're one of the safest things that we know of to deliver to the body. So the sound waves can be still delivered and activated with the device, the buttons on the device. And you can adjust the intensity with the buttons on the device, even when it's not connected to the phone, which is really nice because personally, I get it. I don't want to have my phone on me all the time or have to have my phone on me all the time to feel good. I want to be able to set my phone down and be able to still, have my tools with me that work without requiring the phone. And then if I want to go back to the phone, I can go back to the phone, but it's more intentional.
Will it hold a charge for a long time?
So it holds a charge if you don't use, in standby mode. I think it's something like 12 days, 15 days. If you use it, it will last. If you use it as we recommend, which is roughly 2.5 hours a day, or 2 to 3 hours a day, then you get about 2 days out of it. If you use it more than that, then you have to charge it more frequently. And that's not a big deal. You just find a time to charge it, and it charges within an hour, 1 to 2 hours, and then you have another full battery capacity out of that. We are constantly working to make the battery life better. But it just takes time. And
as long as it goes through your whole night's sleep or most of your day, that should be fine, I would think.
Yeah. And it does. And I think the people who do use it more often, that use it, all the time when they first get it, they actually schedule in time during their day, usually during a meal, to plug it in, which is funny, but it's good because that structure of having a schedule is also very helpful to us in terms of recovering, because it sets boundaries. It says, hey, it's time for recovery now, not time for work. Right. And then you kind of have these like firm, self-imposed, but still firm boundaries that allow us to disengage from one state of mind or activity and then enter into another.
Which is actually, interestingly, I talk to a lot of people who are working from home right now, and that's become increasingly difficult when they're working at home and they just end up keep working. Yeah.
I did that too. I am a complete, perpetrator of that. It is very difficult, and it's something that I've really struggled with in the last year in particular with COVID. But now, it's really just a matter, and what I've started to do now is I made a schedule, and I just really, hold myself to it. And I just because I know that if I do it, I just feel so much better.
Right.
And that's all there is to it.
No,
And I want to feel good.
Same thing. Besides my full-time practice, I do the podcast, and I'm always working on show notes or working on notes for the next interview, or etc. So it's hard to shut off.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we need a device like this.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, the struggle is real for sure. And I think that's why, especially with doctors, like I used to work in the psychiatric ER, like when we first had this prototype of the Apollo, I was working in the psychiatric ER a lot. I was seeing a lot of very, very high risk mental health patients. People, having the Apollo was just a game changer. To be able to have something that allowed me or help me figure out again how to calm myself down quickly, without taking like a supplement to help me sleep, or without having a glass of wine, or, not that having a glass of wine is a bad thing. It's not, but we shouldn't be dependent on it for rest, because it doesn't actually help us sleep. It actually just makes us feel like we sleep better, but we actually sleep a lot worse, and are actually less rested and have more of a sleep deficit down the road. So, we have I think ultimately what working on Apollo really taught me that was so incredible was that we have the ability in ourselves to heal ourselves. We through learning how to use the tools that we have access to in ourselves, we have the ability to heal ourselves and to really make ourselves so much better than we are. Life is like a constant game of growth, and how fast can we grow out as well as we can grow in the direction we want to grow, right? Or we think we want to grow.
Absolutely.
And, working on Apollo really taught me, and using Apollo over time taught me that, there's a hell of a lot more going on in here than I thought there was. Cool. It's just because the anxiety is, and the fear is what, and we actually call it, Catherine, my wife, was the CEO of Apollo. We came up with this funny term, which I think is really true, which is the fear that we are either taught to feel or feel for whatever reason about uncertainty or newness or unfamiliarity or anxiety or whatever. It's really fear of the unknown. It's fear of uncertainty and fear of losing control of our lives, our situation. And that creates a box around us that we eloquently entitled the fear box, that literally creates the reality that we live in. And if we in every moment of our day, we have the opportunity to pay attention to love or fear. And if there's love and fear in every moment coexisting together in every moment of our day. And if we direct our attention to fear, we will live in that fear box. And if we direct our attention to love, we will climb out of the fear box and we will find our actual path.
Right. Awesome. Great way to end this interview. It's been very fascinating. How can people find out? How can they order the Apollo and find out more information about you?
Device. Sure. Yeah. So for Apollo, you can go to apolloneuroscience.com or apolloneuro.com, APOLLONEURO.com. And I believe we have some sales that are either going on or coming up. So stay tuned there. And you could sign up, and you can also sign up for our newsletter on the website, where we send out a lot of, very helpful tips that I have helped to write myself based on things that I've done and that I do with my clients, which is basically free information to help people feel good at a time where things are really crazy in our world. And to feel, frankly, just more in control of our own lives. That's what this is about. And if we spend more time paying attention to things we can control, we will feel more in control. Breath is the start of that, and movement and these things, everything we've been talking about today. And people can find, if you'd like to find me or get in touch, you could check out my website. It's drdave.io. That's my clinical practice website. And I also can be reached through social media, at Twitter at Dave Rabin, and on Instagram at Dr. David Rabin.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'll send you links after we post this in about 6 weeks.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Ben.